Hello viewers, thank you for joining me. So you're getting an extra review this month, because while I do want to review the movies, I also don't want Free to completely take over my channel. The 2 seasons already took up 2 months, so I figure I'll just try to fit the movies in wherever I can before Season 3 airs. And I recently found an announcement that Take Your Marks will be airing in theaters for a special one-day event in the US on March 14th, so I figured I'd better get a move on. Starting Days is a prequel of sorts. It tells the story of High Speed, the light novel that Free is based on. It follows Haru and Makoto's first year of middle school, so there's not really a question of its prequel status, but Free was so flashback heavy that it feels more accurate to me to say that it takes place in the middle of the story. Before the events of Free and Eternal Summer, but after the main event that defined the anime, the 4 boys forming their relay team and then Rin leaving for Australia. True to form, this movie tells the story of the formation of another relay team. There are only 4 first years to join the middle school swim team. Haru and Makoto, of course, and then 2 boys from Haru's class. Asahi, who's loud and confident, and Ikuya, who's a little more complicated. Also true to form, this movie is really all about the character stories. Asahi's is pretty straightforward. He's really the driving force behind getting them all to join the swim club, but once he sees how good Haru is, he starts to lose confidence in his own abilities. His story is basically just reinforcing the main idea behind this movie in general, that they all need to start focusing less on themselves and more on the team, that a relay is about more than being good individually. In comparison, Ikuya's story is kind of all over the place. He starts out saying that he'd never join a school swim club because they don't take the sport seriously enough, but it really becomes about getting him to reconnect with his older brother, who's the school team's captain. They used to be really close, but Natsuya started pulling away so his brother would learn to expand his view of the world and rely on himself a little more, leaving Ikuya a bitter, angsty mess. Honestly, his story was probably the most emotional, but it never really connected with me, and I think that has everything to do with where this movie takes place in the timeline. Prequels are always a little difficult for me, and it all goes back to one of the main reasons I get a little obsessive about doing things in chronological order. I mean, I really do commend the creators for putting so much work into all of their characters. I like that everyone has their own story, something to deal with, but in terms of the greater story, any really heartfelt moments with Asahi and Ikuya are undermined a little by the knowledge that we never see them again after this. Like I said, this movie is really about the formation of a new team, and I'll get into their character arcs shortly, but it's just as hard for Haru and Makoto to find their place here. The 4 do eventually come together, but that's where Starting Days ends. It doesn't go on to address the other big event of their childhood, how not long after this, Rin returns for the new year, loses the race with Haru, and Haru, struck by the effect their rivalry is having on his friend, quits swimming altogether. We kind of have to assume that the friendship with Ikuya and Asahi didn't last beyond this decision, and that gives everything kind of a shallower feel. I just can't help feeling like the only way I would have been able to truly appreciate the moments with these 2 is if I'd seen Starting Days first. But on the other hand, I don't think I would have been able to truly appreciate Haru and Makoto's stories without knowing everything I already did about their characters from the anime. This is an interesting time for them. They're both having a hard time moving on from what they feel was the perfect team. For Haru, it's mostly just that he's not good with change. If nothing else, Eternal Summer should have made that clear enough. Nagisa makes a few appearances, and Haru actually makes an effort to keep in touch with and support their friend now that they're not competing together anymore. And this may not sound like much, but try to understand that Haru usually can't be bothered with that sort of thing. It usually falls to Makoto to be polite and responsible and supportive on behalf of the both of them. Haru's one of those characters where little gestures go a long way. But I think Makoto definitely had the strongest story in this movie. I mentioned in my Eternal Summer review that I wanted to see more about Makoto and the role swimming played in his life, and I sort of got my wish in Starting Days. Ikuya's brother is the team captain, but another older student is in charge of supervising the first years. During practice one day, he pulls Makoto aside and asks him why he swims. More specifically, does he actually love swimming himself, or does he just go along with it to spend time with Haru? The question really shakes him up for a while, and he starts pulling away while he tries to figure things out. Haru was already feeling the distance because, for the first time, they're not in the same class, and Makoto was changing a little anyway. Little things like introducing himself to sound older and making new friends. But like I said, little things go a long way with Haru, and he's not good with change, so he accuses Makoto of not being true to himself. A very junior high type of story, so fitting. Anyway, it becomes about their friendship in general, and Makoto ultimately decides that there's no reason he can't swim for both reasons, that he loves swimming and Haru, and you know the story from there. Overall, Starting Days was a good movie, filling in a blank space that, honestly, I probably wouldn't have given much thought to otherwise. It appeals to fans of the anime, obviously. Though it has its own story, it does expand on the characters we already know and love, with cameos from Rei and Sosuke and songs that were recycled or remixed from the show. But I could also see this movie as an adequate place to jump into Free for the first time. I do believe it's the sort of movie new fans would want to go back to and watch again to reevaluate once they have seen the anime, but it does its job as a prequel. There's a lot of focus on the actual training for the sport, which I can't really say is true of the anime, and it really sets up the theme of what it means to be a part of a team, which the anime is all about. This is one of those reviews where it's a little hard to recommend the thing I'm giving so much praise, because no one on this side of the world has licensed it yet, as far as I could tell. I got really lucky and found someone in Singapore selling their copy, which had subtitles in Cantonese, Malay, Chinese, and English, so there is an official subtitled version out there, it just may not be the easiest to find. But if you do manage to get your hands on a copy, I suggest you see it. The story may be a little inconsequential in the grand scheme of things, but Starting Days does give us a deeper look into some of the characters, and it accompanies the anime quite well. Thank you for watching.